Hello, everyone, and welcome to the PR Connections Facebook page. My name is Guy Dawson. I'm the managing member of Classic Communications, and we have been doing a series of interviews with the families of people who have died at the hands of police over the last few weeks, and have gotten such an amazing amount of feedback about this that I'm really been looking forward to having more of these types of interviews. We've had the children, and we have a child today. Her name is Ariah Justin, someone who died at the hands of the police. And of course, these broadcasts wouldn't be taking place without Forced Trajectory. And Nissa Tzun, she is a good friend of mine who has been very active in the community, supporting the rights of victims for many, many years. And Nissa, thank you so much for connecting me with another family member of someone who lost their lives at the hands of the police.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Guy. Thanks for having us and allowing us to expand our platform for impacted family members.
And how did you connect with Ariah?
So it's an interesting story. I learned about Ariah's father's case. Ariah's father's name is Joseph Justin, through sitting on a panel with Captain Nicole Splinter back in November at the Mob Museum. It was a panel organized by UNLV School of Law, and we were, talking about policing and with a focus on interactions with people who are having mental health issues. And in the midst of the conversation, Nicole Splinter revealed that she was involved in an officer-involved shooting and that person passed away. And so it was through learning that I was able to find Ariah and her family through Instagram.
And I know Nissa, again, as I had mentioned before, you very, very active in connecting with the families of people who lose their lives at the hands of police. And I guess every time you meet another person who's been influenced this, it's like another link in the chain, right? Kind of showing a systematic phenomena that we are all experiencing in this country. People have lots of opinions about it, and again, one of the reasons why I'm continuing to do these broadcasts with Nissa and her husband Oja is that I want to show that there is a human side to all of this, that people who make mistakes and are ultimately lose their lives are human beings who have families, mothers, children. And that in the midst of all of this, that we have to continue to remember our humanity. And so again, Nissa, I always appreciate you connecting me with another family member. We had talked about starting to have some of the children, more of the children of victims of being killed at the hands of police. And now we have Ariah here. And so I want to talk with you, Ariah, about some of the circumstances surrounding your father's death. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, it's
okay.
Good.
So can you tell me more? Tell me the story about your dad.
So on August 22nd, 2007, when I was 6 years old, my dad was shot and killed by two LVMPD officers, one being Captain Nicole Splinter, as Nissa said, and the other being Officer Timothy Nicathodes. So what happened was my dad was a suspect in a home invasion. I believe it was a neighbor that called the police saying that somebody was breaking into the neighbor's house. And when the police arrived on scene, they chased my dad in his van at first. And then when he got out of the van, the officers said that he had a gun, but no witnesses said that he had a gun. They said that he pointed it at himself first and then pointed it at the officers. And then that's whenever he was shot. He was shot in the back and in his leg. And he died on the way to the hospital, or at the hospital, I believe.
You being so young at that time, I mean, I'm sure you have memories of your dad, but I would imagine you were very, how old were you?
I was 6 years old. It was 2 months before my 7th birthday.
You were 6 years old. And so tell me what that was like as a 6-year-old when you found out that your dad had passed away.
It was confusing because at first I was just starting first grade. So it was weird because I think it was just a month after that happened, I started first grade. So going into that, I was dealing with transitioning from kindergarten to first grade and then also not having my dad around. So it was really weird, especially on like Father's Day in first grade. I'd be in the counselor's office instead of in class with my classmates. So it was hard. It was a lot of emotions that I didn't know how to deal with.
Yeah, and so this happened quite a while ago, back in 2007. So obviously you've grown up and you're a young woman now. How has this experience of having this have happened to your dad impacted you as you've been growing up, and of course with the things that you're doing now related to showing the pain that the families of people who die at the hands of police experience?
Yeah, so I think in a way it's definitely made me stronger and like realize my purpose. I'm going to UNLV and majoring in criminal justice because I want to be a criminal defense lawyer to help people who are impacted by police violence and stuff like that. And just having that experience and knowing the pain that the families go through all the time because it's something that I live with, it's definitely something that drives me to be able to do better things in my dad's name.
Mm-hmm. And so being such a young girl at that time, you were only 6 years old. And of course, you continue to grow up. You're going through all the experiences in life. But is there ever a point of closure, which I'm sure there isn't? I mean, anytime something as horrific as what happened to your dad happens to you, as far as the people around you and the impact on them, you talked about how you've spent some time in counseling to help you. How about the other people in your family around you? What has that been like for all of you, having gone through an experience like this?
Can you hear me? I can't hear you or see you. Sorry, I couldn't hear anything that you just said. It froze.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
But yeah, you look frozen to me. Ah. Can you hear me now, Ariah?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
But you're frozen. So it's probably your internet connection.
It says I'm connected.
Right. Well, as long as you can hear me, it's okay. I just, again, go ahead and answer because we're still live. So in terms of the impact of the people around you, I know, again, you had talked about that you've done some counseling through the years to help you deal with the trauma related to your father's death. How about the people around you, other members of your family? Can you give us a sense of what the impact of all of this has been for them?
So my little sister was born 4 months after my dad was killed, so she never really got to meet him or know him. And with her, we were never really able to get counseling because through the school that was seen as like a family issue. So with her, it's kind of like she only knows him through the stories and the pictures that we share with her. So that's definitely hard on me, knowing that she relies on us to tell her about my dad. And then with my mom, I think my dad dying kind of sent her to like a downward spiral, and she's actually in prison right now. And I think that is my dad's death paid a big contribution to that. And then my grandma, she kind of just has to take care of us, so she doesn't have the time and the opportunity to like actually grieve.
Yeah, I can imagine the challenges that come with that, and again the impact that it has on so many people's lives when you have difficult circumstances like this. Back in 2007, of course, police brutality is something that didn't start yesterday. We know that it has existed probably for as long as there have been people in police, but it wasn't as consistently prominent as it has been in about the last 10 years back in 2007. So the coverage of this wasn't blanketed the way that, of course, we're hearing so much about recent deaths at the hands of
Yeah.
police. You now, being a young woman and being a part of this movement, how are these recent circumstances, or the ones that you've been experiencing as you've grown up, how does that affect you when you hear another one of these cases that come up about someone that died through the hands of police officers?
Well, it definitely opens old wounds because my dad did pass away so long ago, and nothing was really done with that, like social media wise, because it was so long ago. And just seeing, like, especially with George Floyd, his death was captured on video, so everybody had to watch it, and that's why so many people responded the way that they did. So it definitely, it hurts just knowing that other people have to go through that pain, especially knowing that he has a 6-year-old daughter. So it's just weird because I know that the pain that they're going to be experiencing, so I feel like it's my job to like uplift their families' names too.
And the other families that we've been talking to have all touched on the fact that having groups of people who have very similar experiences, like support groups, these other families who really have an understanding of the pain that a person experiences when they lose a loved one in this way. For you, being a part of organizations that support one another, family members, how is that impacting you and your ability to be able to cope with loss, and when you have these times when the wounds get reopened?
Yeah, it's definitely helpful just being around other people that like know the pain that you're going through and know that the emotions that you're dealing with. They're able to help you by telling you things that they've used to get through it, or different ways that they've been able to cope with their own issues. And it's definitely, it's empowering. It gives me a lot of strength knowing that I have people that know how I'm feeling and the different emotions that I'm going through that I can't express, and just being able to have them there so that whenever I do feel down or I am sad or upset or anything, I can reach out to them and they'll know like the things that I'm going through and they can help me with that, and vice versa.
And I know that your grandmother is here, and we wanted to bring her in on the broadcast. Is she still sitting next to you?
Yeah, she's right here.
So could we bring her on for a second? I'd like to talk to her a little bit.
Yep, she's here. Can you see her?
I can't see her, but I can. Welcome to the show, Donna.
Thank you.
So we've been speaking with Ariah about her experience. I know she was a very young girl when this happened, and I would like to get your take on this. How did this impact you back in 2007?
I became very bitter, very angry. I guess you could say I had a black heart when all this happened. Knowing I could not go see him, they wouldn't give me nothing that belonged to him. And knowing that I had a little girl that I was now going to have to raise. To have to go to school and tell him that her daddy was shot by a police officer, and it makes you look at life a whole different way than what you used to look at life about.
And can you tell us about the circumstances surrounding this? As you mentioned that it sounds like you didn't get very much information about it all. Tell us about how this was handled by the.
We were told not to say nothing, not to talk about it. That Ariah was only 6 years old, and that she would be going through too much for us even saying about it. And if we asked questions or did anything, the newscasters would get a hold of it, and then it would cause even more problems for Ariah when she was going to go to school. So I needed to protect Ariah. I thought she was going through too much as it was for her having to deal with that and kids asking questions, because like I said, it was only a month after She started in first grade. So kids ask questions. Small children don't realize how much they can impact on another child that has lost a family member.
Yes, and so for you, again, this is something that happened back in 2007, which was about 13 years ago.
Yes.
Through the years, how have you been impacted by this?
I
And
kept very silent. Ariah is a very smart and intelligent young lady. She was going through school. She was going to get scholarships and that. So I really didn't talk about it. I didn't want to affect her and having her have concerns and issues through school. So we never talked about it. It was a subject that was really very closed up. If she asked questions, I never would lie to her. At the same time, I wouldn't bring up and open a wound that could hurt. And so we didn't talk about it. We had a lot of police officers that were our friends. And after Joe died, we broke our friendship.
you had a lot of police officers who were your friends prior to this happening.
Yes, my mother worked for the Fusion Center that down on Las Vegas Boulevard area and at the Martin Luther King's office. So my mom worked with police officers also. We also my mom and dad lived 2 houses down from a police officer that was good friends of theirs. So yes, we were friends with police officers.
And so, having been friends with police officers, I mean, obviously, when something like this happens to you, you see a different side of it all. I mean, what was that like, having had these people as a part of your life, and then for something as horrible as this to happen, basically, you've sort of been saying they shoved it under the rug. I mean,
Absolutely. And they did not come to my son's funeral. So that even made me more angry that they only got their version of what happened from the other police officers. They never asked us not one question. And when they didn't come to the funeral, they weren't our friends, not at all.
At what point did you begin to open up about this? Because, I mean, you're doing a great job today describing all of this. And I know you had mentioned before that you had just kept it very quiet for a while. When did you start talking about this?
When Nissa got a hold of us. Last December.
Oh.
That was the only time. Ariah came to me and said she got a text from Nissa, and she asked me if she could answer, and I said yes. I had no problem with that. That if she was old enough now to understand what was going on, and she could ask any questions she wanted to.
And now that you have an opportunity to talk about this more, how is it impacting you? Being able
It's
to
opened up a lot of old wounds. A lot of times I get very bitter still to this day. I'm very emotional about it. But if it's going to make Ariah grow and understand that friends aren't always your friends, and she's going to have to realize that. I mean, we teach our children right from wrong, but there's a lot of wrong that goes on in this world that people keep quiet. And so it was time to open up the can of worms and let it out.
And through the years, I'm sure you've seen, of course, as I had mentioned before, back in 2007, it wasn't that this wasn't happening. It just wasn't nearly as popular as it has been in recent years, where we're just having case after case after case that's publicized in terms of police brutality. And for you, if someone was going through something like this, like you went through back in 2007,
Mm-hmm.
do you have advice that would help them be able to cope with it in ways that maybe you weren't able to at that time?
Yeah, I would tell them get a lawyer. Don't listen to police tell you keep your mouth shut. Don't listen to the police tell you it's his fault. You have to accept it. We weren't in a situation where we could afford a lawyer, so I had to accept what was being. I didn't have to. I chose to accept what was happening because I didn't have money to back me up or support me. I had no legal counseling whatsoever, and I'd tell him get a lawyer. I'd tell him get a hold of Nissa. I would tell him to fight tooth and nail and don't always believe what's told to you.
And with the impact, of course, the George Floyd incident where he died at the hands of police, and I mean, we've got a whole country that really, really engaged in a lot around this topic right now. What are your thoughts?
That he had a camera. I am so grateful people had pictures.
Mm.
They can't keep saying it's him, he was too strong or anything like that. I am grateful for the cameras today. Back then they didn't have cameras, and if they did have cameras, we didn't know nothing about it. So in that respect, I'm so grateful it came out, and they can't do no lying now. I don't care if this man had marijuana on him. I don't care if he was high. It's still, I can't breathe. That man actually told that police officer, I can't breathe. There's no reason for him to keep his leg on his neck. There's no reason why 3 other officers couldn't help him stand and let him sit up. So I'm angry on that one.
Well, I really appreciate you, Donna, for taking the time again with Ariah. She has a different experience than you have, with you actually having lost your son and going through the impact of all of that. Not only that, but having had a lot of friends who were police officers and probably thinking that police are here to protect you, right? I mean, there's very different perspectives on what the police's role is in people's lives, depending on who you are. And so for you to have had friends on the police department, they're seen for a lot of people as protectors, and to have something like this happen and impact your life in such a horrific way, I applaud you for your braveness, knowing that this is reopening wounds, and but for being willing to speak out and be a part of broadcasts, and so that we can continue to promote education about what's happening here. I just think it's admirable what you've been willing to do after all these years.
Well, thank you. But again, we have to thank Nissa, because Nissa reached out to us, and it would still probably be a silent can of worms in our household if this didn't happen.
Yes, it takes a lot of bravery to be able to, especially when you're that far removed for something, to be willing to take it on again, knowing that the wounds could be reopened, but that I think this is where we start to solve the problems. We have to be willing to be brave the way that you have been. And again, I admire both you and Ariah for being willing to come forward and continue to share, and also to be involved in this movement that's I think is going to have a huge impact on the way that things are done in terms of police reform or changes in the ways that they go about doing things. And it's because people speak up that happens. And so thank you both so much for being a part of the broadcast today.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Nissa, again, I always appreciate you bringing me these impacted families. Is there anything that you'd like to share that's going on with Forced Trajectory right now? How are things on the front line?
I was actually going to ask Ariah if she wanted to share her demands and see if that's something that she wants to share.
Yeah.
Please do, Ariah.
Yeah, so our first demand that I think is one of the most important ones is that we want Captain Nicole Splinter to step down from her position and off the force entirely. She, basically what happened is she killed my dad and she got a promotion because she's now overseeing all police-involved shootings here in Las Vegas. So that's definitely on the top of our list of our demands that we want to see happen. We also want Officer Timothy Nicothodes to no longer receive his $180,000 medical retirement deal that he signed under the table with Metro, especially because after he killed my dad, he went on to injure a 19-year-old girl in a DUI accident in Montana, where he was going twice the posted speed limit, and he also had a blood alcohol percent of 0.219, which is more than triple the limit. So we want him to no longer receive that $180,000 of taxpayer money. And we also want my dad's belongings back. It's been 13 years and we don't have any of his clothes, his shoes, his jewelry, or anything that he was wearing the day that it happened. And we also want to see funding go back into the community. I don't think the police need all the militarization that they are getting. And I think that they are not using the money that they're given appropriately. And if they don't use it appropriately, it needs to be given back to the people that need it. Like for mental health crisis, create a team where mental health professionals go out to calls that require mental health care instead of sending police officers with guns and lethal force to people that are just asking for help.
Well thought out demands.
Thank you.
All right. Well, appreciate you for sharing them. And yeah, Nissa, how are things going?
Good. We are, collectively organizing daily, weekly. We are getting everyone's demands together. There's going to be a lot of things moving forward, including press conferences, more panels, events. As COVID is now kind of on the rise, we have to kind of reconsider lot like in-person events. But nonetheless, we are going to be continuing virtually as a backup in the case that we're not able to meet in person. And currently, local families are working on. We've been working very hard on individual case demands. Some of those which Ariah shared for her case. And then we're also working on collective demands for the local police department, but also statewide and also national demands. And we are in the midst of connecting with elected officials to talk about, the impact that families receive due to the trauma and from the police homicide. And yeah, we're really asking the community to continue to be engaged in this conversation around restructuring policing locally and nationally, what policing looks like, and to have that conversation again and again and again, and to allow those who are directly impacted to lead that conversation.
And these interviews that we're doing, these again, I think are so important in this whole process of. I talk about it on each of these broadcasts, is really the humanization of people, and because when we rely on certain sources, which could be the government or could be traditional media, to give us the whole story, a lot of times we don't get that story. But when we have the opportunity to meet with a family, to meet with the daughter of someone who was killed at the hands of the police, or the mother of someone who passed away, we get a whole different perspective that I greatly appreciate, and one that is not necessarily presented to you in traditional platforms where you get your information. And that's one of the reasons why we exist. And I appreciate my relationship with Nissa and Oja and the families that they are bringing on air. We have plans to bring more families on to tell their stories about how they are impacted by their family members dying at the hands of police. And every day, even in the traditional media, we hear story after story after story of this tragedy, which means, as most people will say, where there's smoke, there's fire. Mm-hmm. That's what most people will tell you. And so I think it's important that we continue to turn on our smoke detectors and mm-hmm. To continue to justice for people, and to understand that this is a bigger picture maybe than it is presented to you, maybe on the TV news or in the newspaper, where sometimes you don't get the full story. As we all know, it's a different platform that we have here on social media, as I had mentioned before, to really bring the families and the humanity of these situations right to you through social media and these recordings. So yes, always appreciate you, Nissa. Can't wait till we get together with another family. And when I say I can't wait till we get together with another family, it's not like it's a happy experience here, but this is the work that has to be done. These things have to be addressed. This is an important time, I think, in the history of this country, and again, this is the platform for it. So looking forward to getting together with the next family or learning more about what Force Trajectory is doing to contribute to creating justice for people in this country, Nissa.
For sure. And actually, I'd like to, I don't know if we do have more time, right? Can we kind of talk a little bit about some of the analysis in regards to how the media reported on Joseph Justin's case? Is that something that you'd be interested in discussing?
We do have time.
Okay. So, one of the things that, one of the reasons why the Force Trajectory Project reaches out to families is because, and I think Donna did a great job in describing the stigma, the stigmatization of the family once a loved one is killed by police. In general, because of the way that it's pumped out in media, which is that so-and-so was a suspect, that word suspect is very criminalizing, because what it does a suspect means? It means that that person is suspicious. The police are suspicious of that person being involved in a crime. It doesn't mean that they've been charged in the crime. It doesn't mean that they were guilty of the crime. It doesn't mean all it means is that the police have identified a suspect that they think could have been involved in a crime, right? And so that term immediately criminalizes that victim when it's put in the media. You see what I'm saying? And so because of words like drug suspect or burglary suspect or armed robbery suspect, etc., is utilized in the media narrative and in the police narrative, what ends up happening is the institution of journalism and the institution of policing is priming the public, the audience, for this story. They're already like, oh, this person was clearly guilty of something, and therefore, when we tell the story of what happened in this police interaction, the public is already primed to believe that, oh, okay, well, no loss here because a criminal is gone and police are doing their job and they're cleaning up the streets. And so that's part of the reason why families become stigmatized and become isolated in their own community where they have no support. That's why they lose their friends. That's why they used to have police officers as friends, and then all of a sudden, they're turning their back. Well, that's also because of the blue line, right? That we all know about, right? That police have each other's backs and they won't, say anything bad about another officer. They kind of stick together. But it's really important that people understand when they hear of a police shooting or a police killing and they read the article in the newspaper, the only thing that they can really assume is true. And I say that 99% of the time, because there has been a case that I know about where the victim survived and was reported as being killed. So when the audience, the public, reads about an officer-involved shooting or police-related killing of some sort, the most they can assume that's true is that that person is gone, that person is dead. In regards to what happened, we really can't assume that the police narrative and the media narrative is correct. In fact, in doing this work and working with tens of and hundreds of impacted family members, I have yet to meet one family where the narrative that was pumped out in the media in regards to their case is actually on point and is actually true. In this case of Joseph Justin, there were witnesses, and the witnesses all said that they did not see a gun on Joseph Justin. Meanwhile, the police narrative is that he had a gun. He was pointing the gun at the officers. They were in fear for their lives, right? Which is, and I'll get into that in a second. And that's the reason why they shot. But if that's the case, then why was he shot in the back, right? And so there's two Supreme Court cases that need to be overturned. One is called Tennessee versus Garner. The other one is called Graham versus Connor. Both of these Supreme Court cases basically make police homicide legal, which is why the conviction rate for police killings is extremely small. It's literally less than 0.5% in the nation, which means that 99.5% of these officers who commit homicide are out there on the streets, a lot of them with a badge and a gun still, working the same streets, working for the same department. Some of them kill and kill again and hurt other people. Sometimes if there's news around that, they get transferred out. If it's a really big case, like in the case of Tashi Brown, they get fired because the department knows that it would look bad to keep that person on the department, and they don't want to look bad. But then they get rehired, because sometimes even by the same department, because the union, the police union, is extremely powerful, and they will do everything they can to advocate for their police officers, including legal representation and taking care of all of their financial needs. If they're in jail, they bail them out, etc. Just like police officer Derek Chauvin, who killed George Floyd, as we saw. So I wanted to put that out there because it's important for people to understand that when Nicole Splinter and Timothy Nicothodes both said we were in fear for our lives, they were referring to, because they knew ahead of time that those two Supreme Court cases protect police officers. And so I don't know for sure if they were coached to say that, but I'm going to assume that that's where they got that from, because police officers all across the country know about those two Supreme Court cases because it protects them. And so it's really, really important that as we're moving forward in this discussion about the role of policing, restructuring the police force, if that means more reforms, if that means dismantling the police department as we know it, reallocating funds, defunding, et cetera, whatever it is that we end up moving forward with, is really, really important for everybody in this discussion and those impacted by police violence to be aware of the legislation and the Supreme Court cases and the police union that all make the barriers, that all create these barriers for justice to actually happen.
Mm-hmm. There's always a bigger picture than is often presented to us, and the information that you share is great, Nissa, to give us a broader perspective. And I do hope that this type of information gets out to people so that when you want to snap to judgment about things, that you understand that there is a lot of times a much bigger picture, and that there are people out there who are on the front lines like Nissa who see the bigger picture. And again, that's what platform like this is for. It's to give a larger perspective. It's not about hating the police. It's about an understanding of the bigger picture, and that there's often a lot more that meets the eye in any situation. By the way, as we as adults, a lot of times are open in certain areas to seeing a bigger picture. But for some reason, when it comes to the police, it seems we're a lot of times just not open to understanding until you're one of those suspects that's just innocently walking. By the way, that can happen to anybody at any time. It's happened to me walking down the street. Exactly. I could be a suspect doing absolutely nothing, just walking down the street. You can become a suspect like that. Exactly. And a police officer approaches you for no reason other than they say you fit the description. That has happened to me in my life.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it's so important for people to understand that, because, and what you just mentioned earlier is another thing that needs to be broken down, which is that adults are usually just the public at large are very uncomfortable in talking about policing and to touch this topic. And I really relate it to, it's almost like that religious mindset, right? It's like when you are, I'm not trying to bad talk organized religion, but there are some people that are very overzealous about the religious beliefs that they can't even talk about it, right? Because they're so attached to that belief and that value of that religion that they're not able to open their minds and consider other possibilities or other value systems or belief systems. And that's the same with policing. And the reason why is because, well, we've been lied to for, since the beginning of this country, not just by police departments, but by Hollywood feature films, by shows like Law and Order, which has been shown by evidence-based research that they don't actually paint any kind of reality that's close to the actual reality of police work. So for example, there's been research done on the effectivity of police and their ability to solve crimes. Law and Order had a whole season where every single crime was solved, 100% crime solving rate. Whereas the reality of policing is that, and this is again, evidence-based research, Pew Research Center is what generated these numbers, half of violent crimes are reported, right? So that's only 50% of violent crimes that are reported. Well, under 50% of those crimes are actually closed or solved. And again, we don't really know what that means because those are police terms. So does that mean they caught the person that did the violent crime? I don't know. It just means that it's closed or solved, right? Or resolved in some way. So, and then property crimes, only a third of property crimes are actually reported, and way less than half of those crimes are actually solved. So when you look at the entire picture of crime solving and police effectivity in regards to solving crimes, we're only talking about 10 to 20% of crimes actually being resolved in some kind of manner and addressed. So then the question becomes, well, what do we need police for? What is the role of policing? And if they're doing, and can we compare it to the rate of murder that they commit and the rate of corruption that these departments take part in, which is, there's tons of research on that. And there's tons of, investigative journalism reports on that as well, in terms of like how corrupt they are, how much they cover up crimes, how they, there's so much police secrecy that you can't, there's no way to sue police, or there's no way to, I mean, there is a way, but it's like very, very, very difficult for any of these families to get justice. Is the 20% crime solving rate worth, right? Is it worth the amount of mayhem that they cause in the community? And so it's like, that's what needs to be looked at. Why are people so attached to the idea of policing? Is there a way for us to restructure it so that it's more effective, like emergency response? Like why, for example, like why are people calling 911 for help and they're getting killed? That doesn't make any sense. If they're calling 911 for help because they need help, and why are we sending an armed person to that 911 call? Maybe they're having a mental health breakdown. Maybe it's a situation that needs de-escalation. Meanwhile, police show up and they escalate situations, and then they end up killing and hurting somebody. So we really need to look at policing in general and compare that with how we think of police, because how we think of it isn't necessarily what's actually happening. You see what I'm saying? And so the public at large needs to be involved in that conversation.
Well, these conversations are so important, Nissa, and they're going on all over the world. And again, I think that we've had such a big impact as a result of course, COVID and the recent events with police, that I see this as an ongoing discussion. And like I always tell you, I just appreciate the people who've been on the front line like you for a very long time, who are now, in a sense, you're kind of like the NFL, where the NFL came forward and they talked about Colin Kaepernick, and when he took the kneel, and they said, we should have listened to you, Colin, right? That's what the NFL has said in that, from that perspective. And I think that people like you who are going around talking with the media and doing the things that you're doing, it's verification of the things that you've been talking about, and the hard work that you've been putting into making the world aware of. Nothing is necessarily exactly the way that it seems to be, and policing definitely fits in that category, along with a lot of other things in life. But again, Nissa, I love having these families on to talk about the impact that that these events are having on their lives, and I look forward to the next family that we bring on. Do you have anything else you want to talk about that's happening in the community or that you're going to be a part of?
For sure. Actually, I wanted to see if we can bring Ariah and Donna back on and just have them share, a photo of Ariah's father. And I know that we've been having video issues, so I don't know if that's possible. But maybe let's try.
Yeah, she's not even.
Oh, there
There she is, but she's
Can you see
frozen.
me?
Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, we can see you, but you're frozen.
Island
That's the problem with us
sharing.
not being able to see a picture of your dad.
Well, what we could do is at least engage Ariah in a conversation about. So Ariah is an artist. She's a very talented artist. And I learned recently that she takes after her father, who was an amazing artist as well. So Ariah, maybe you can share a little bit about who your father was. What was your relationship like with him? And how do you carry on his legacy as you live your life?
Yeah, so my dad, he was a really good artist. He would always draw portraits of me and send them to me. And he was just really a happy-go-lucky type of guy. His favorite holiday was 4th of July. He would tie as many fireworks together as he could and light them off and see the biggest one that he could get. He just would make anybody laugh, whether you wanted to or not. He was just the kind of person that would make you happy and put a smile on your face. So how I keep his legacy on is also through art. I like to draw and do artwork, and just like the picture that I did with, I drew a picture of me and him based off a picture that we had together. So that's kind of a way that I still stay connected with him.
Ariah, can you talk a little bit about, I remember that you had shared on a past interview about how your father was being kind of targeted by the police. Can you talk about that? And
yeah, I think it would be better if my grandma told you about that
Sure.
story, if that's
Sure.
fine. Do you remember whenever the police officers said that they would bring him back?
Joey was a handful. Joey got in mischief. Joey did drugs. He was no angel. But this one time they were looking for my son, and when the police officers pulled us over, he nicely told me, "Someday I'll bring your son home in a body bag."
Mm.
I will never forget what he said. I will never forget his face. I do not know the police officer's name, but if I had to go through a lineup and see that man, I would know who it was. And Joey was only 17 years old then. And there wasn't, if you were down and had nothing, Joey would open up the doors and say, "Hey, Mom, they don't have nothing to eat today. We're going to feed them." And I'd say, "Okay." But Joey was always looking for somebody to help. And he was a good kid. He'd make you laugh. But he also got in trouble. He did drugs. Joey did drugs. And but he wouldn't lie about it. That's one thing I can say. He might have done a lot wrong, but all I had to do was go and ask him. He'd tell me the truth, whether or not he did it. But this, like I said, it was on a Saturday. I had gotten off of work, and we were going to pick up Ariah at her mom's house. And the police officers pulled us over 5 houses from our house and wanted to search my van. It was a little tiny van, and wanted to search the van to see if my son was in it. And that's when he told me, "I'm going to bring your son home in a body bag." Well, they brought him home in a body bag. There's no doubt about it. But now it's our turn to fight back. It's our turn to let them listen to what we have to say now. And police are not, they can be touched now. They were never able to be touched. Joe was, when we went to the coronary autopsy or whatever it was called, we weren't allowed to ask no questions. If you wanted to ask a question to the judge, or to the witness or anything. You had to write a note down to the judge, and then the judge would say yes or no if you could have the question asked. So at no time were we allowed to talk. And I think that's very wrong. I think we should be able to ask any question and look that person in the face too and ask a question. Why is it only the police could ask questions? Today's society and what has happened, everybody is going to be heard now. And I'm grateful for that. I am truly grateful that now people can be heard. And I feel so bad for people that are going through this right now because it should not be happening.
Donna, what if you had a chance to reopen the criminal case for your son? Is that something that you would want to do?
Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. Let it be known that Joe did not have a gun. Since when in God's name is a back a threat? Since when is a person who has their back turned to a police officer, when in God's name does that become a threat that they have to kill that person?
That's right.
And I mean, you see more of it with young black men than you do white. And they run because they're scared. They're scared of the police. Why in the hell do we have to be afraid of the police? I mean, we teach our children if something happens, call 911. I can't say that my grandchildren right now will call 911. I can't say that Keely, who is 12 years old, will call 911. She's paranoid of the police. She's scared to death of the police. She remembers that gun when her mom got arrested for drugs. She remembers the SWAT team coming in and putting a gun at her head. And she was only 7 years old. Right? Yeah, she was 7 years old, and SWAT came in and put a gun to that little girl's head.
Can you talk about that, Donna, and what happened? What led up to that incident?
Yes, Monica was doing drugs. She was selling drugs. Am I correct? Right? She was selling drugs, and we got a phone call from the police that they had broke into the house, and the SWAT team had broken in. Monica was being arrested for us to come pick up the kids. We immediately stopped what we were doing, and we went over there. And Keely came running out to me and says, "Grandmother, there's guns, there's guns, there's guns." And I said, "Okay, we'll find out what's going on." So I went to walk over there, and they told me I was forbidden in the house. And I said, "Okay." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to go until I know everything is fine. The kids' stuff's in that house." And they told us we had 24 hours to take everything out of that house. And it was just Ariah and I, and I'll be honest with you, I was embarrassed. I didn't want to have to ask a bunch of people for help because I didn't know what we were getting into in that house. But when we did go into the house, they tore up the kids' toys. They tore up clothes. They went through everything. They tore up the couch. There was no reason to even take the couch outside because it was all in, what would you say? It was just tore up. It was all cut up. And Keely had a little stuffed animal. It was all tore up. And she says, that policeman did that. And I says, "What did that policeman do to you?" And he says, "Oh, he held that gun to my head, Grandma." And she remembers this. And it's sad that she remembers all the bad stuff. Because like I said, if some emergency came up, I can't say that she will call 911.
And so you guys had to evacuate the house because of the arrest?
Right. Yeah, Ariah was in exams, weren't you? Yeah, you were doing your exams. Ariah was in sophomore year of high school. And so we had a Ford Escort and Escape, and we just kept loading and loading and loading. This happened at 6 o'clock at night, and we worked till 3 o'clock to get most of the stuff, the important stuff that had any type of value whatsoever. And then we got up, and I had to go to school and talk to her, the dean, to make sure that he understood that she was going to be in school, that she's gone through another episode with the police. And we went back, and then some friends of ours through the church, and they heard that we were needing help, and they all came over, and we unloaded everything in my backyard.
Mm-hmm. And so you had a lot of property damage during that time. Did the state or did the police ever offer to replace those items or anything like that?
No, not at all. I mean, they made the mess, and we had to clean it. We let the house go. The house was in Monica's dad's name because Monica's father had died 2 years prior to that. So everything was in his name. We just took the kids' stuff that was decent. Anything that had like Keely's and Joey's jeans, if they had pockets, they ripped the pockets on the jeans. They went through everything that you could possibly imagine, and just, they didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
They did not care.
Did they have a search warrant to go into the house to make that arrest?
I don't know. That I don't know. I have no idea. I'd have to ask her mom. We keep, with me having the kids and that, her mom calls once a week. The kids talk to her mom and everything. Like I said, though, the kids only remember the bad stuff. They don't remember the good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for going into that memory Rolodex and bringing that out. I know that it might have been traumatizing for you, but thank you for sharing. It's very important. I
hope and pray that if any family member has to go through what we've went through with both parents, is I hope someday there's counseling for families with children. Today, there is no counseling, and if you need help with your children, the school won't help you because that's a family domestic problem. Unless they get violent at school, counselors will not help children today.
And in fact, they actually have police officers in schools that are now, and it's been for years now. And we're just finding out about some of these statistics right now. We're in some conversations around how often pepper spray and tasers are used on children in elementary school, middle school, and high school. And it's at an alarming rate here in Clark County School District.
Oh, yeah,
which is
it is
extremely unfortunate.
It is.
Yeah.
But thank you. Your turn, Ryan.
Yeah, just very powerful stories, and thank you, Nissa, for going into a little bit more depth, and because there's always a story behind every situation, as I had mentioned before, and again, we're looking forward to having more of these interviews and speaking with people who have been impacted in this way at the hands of police. And again, this isn't designed for me when I approached Nissa about wanting to start to have the families of people who had died at the hands of police. It wasn't meant as a strike against the police type thing. It's meant as part of the ongoing process of dialogue.
That's right.
The only way that things change is you've got to start to talk about it. You've got to do what Donna has done, which is get out of, she had been silenced about it for a long time, and now that she's opening up, that's how you make change. That's the purpose of why we are doing these broadcasts, and I look forward to having more of the families of people on the show to share their stories, to bring humanity, as I talk about in one of these broadcasts, to situations, because it's always a human experience. And again, Nissa, if you don't have anything else to say, we'll be back very soon with another family.
Yes, thank you, Guy. Thank you so much for the platform.
All right, so stay tuned for more broadcasts here at prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media, along with these ongoing broadcasts that we're doing in terms of situations with the police that end up in the death of people. We've got a host of other shows at prconnectionsradio.com in sports and politics and business, but we look forward to our next broadcast over here. It'll be announced very soon on this Facebook page. Take care of yourselves and be safe out there. See you soon.
Thank you so much.